From this moment on, none of you are safe. I'm joined here today with Johnny. I'm Mike, and we're here in the Comic Corner talking about Batman Year One, written by Frank Miller and the art by David Mazzucchelli. We've got another late 80s DC comic book here. I don't know how we did it, but we managed to get. It's funny. This one was actually, it came out while Watchmen was still ongoing, so it's a good tie-in to our Watchmen one, because Watchmen was it started in 86, but as it was still ongoing, because that was 12 issues, Batman Year One started to sneak out too. So interesting that two great titles kind of going on at the same time here.
Yeah, and they both have that like very 80s like dystopian future feel to them.
Yeah, especially having read them back to back. And we'll get into it with certain scenes and whatnot, but yeah, it definitely seems to be kind of pulling from the same tropes and even societal fears at this time. We get a lot of like dark, cityscapes of thugs and prostitutes and stuff like that, and justice needing to be done there. But yeah, so again, we're talking about Batman Year One here. It was initially 4 issues. It was in the Batman series, Batman number 404, going on through to 407. So unlike Watchmen, it came in after the Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this was a point in DC's time where they felt that the timelines were like too convoluted, too many stories going on, and then also like a lot of contradictions, because at some point they'd been writing the characters for so long that eventually backstories get muddled or seems to overlap on one another and contradict. So they're kind of like, all right, we're gonna have this entire like franchise rewriting event. And then Frank Miller was asked, after doing The Dark Knight Returns, which was basically kind of like Batman's last story, he was asked on again to do basically Batman's first story, which was Batman Year One, which tells the original kind of Bob Kane intro to Batman, but with some tweaks on it and some adjustments to make it kind of more believable and more modernized in some ways. And it, follows kind of that late 80s era of making superheroes that are kind of in a more grounded reality. It's not like everything's spectacular or everything's supernatural. It's like Batman's just a guy in this one as usual. So
so for those who don't know, in 1986 when this was written, right after Crisis on Infinite Earth, they did reboot the entire DC line. So Superman and Wonder Woman, which were the other 2 of their big 3, actually got new lines, new number 1 issues. And actually, I was able to read the deluxe version of this story.
Yeah, so did I. I was able to get that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So it had in there that they didn't want to give Batman a new origin because the original one actually fit him so well. They you said, wanted to modernize it, not change it. Because Superman's and I guess Wonder Woman's got changed. I didn't know that, but that's what it sounded like. So
yeah, they did feel like Batman's was enough where hey, we could just kind of leave it as is to some degree. So but yeah, so Batman Year One, like I said, it takes place in 4 parts. Part 1, we're introduced to basically kind of our 2 main characters that are like the 2 perspectives that kind of go back and forth throughout for this. We have traveling into Gotham, we have Lieutenant Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne kind of coming into to Gotham from their respective trips, and also their different mode of transports that kind of shows the different lifestyles that these guys are coming from, because again, like there are 2 perspectives on this story, and we get them from the different angles. One from the police force. Jim Gordon is coming in as lieutenant. He's transferred on over, I believe, or returning back, and then Bruce Wayne coming back from a 12-year abroad studies and training, coming into to Gotham again. And Jim is definitely a lot more apprehensive with it. He's taking the train, so he's a lot, it's a lot grittier, it's a lot more packed, and he's already kind of apprehensive of the city life and the people within it. Whereas Bruce Wayne is flying in on a plane, and kind of shows like they kind of almost class differences that are going on here at the start.
Right, and even Gordon's. What I like about these stories, or what I like about this story and the way it's written, is that there's inner monologue for both those characters. Gordon throughout the 4 issues, and so right off the bat in Gordon's inner monologue, he's talking about like you said, how dirty and gritty the city is, and that doesn't he say that he's glad Barbara's flying in because he doesn't want her
Yeah.
on the train? That like he's a cop and he's like, no, I don't even want to be here, and I've got a gun, I'm packing, and I don't want to be around these people.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And
paints a nice picture of how crime ridden that town is at this point.
Yeah, and they even kind of allude to it too at the start with Barbara. One, maybe I was just an idiot for this too, but I got confused for a second. I thought it was his daughter, Barbara Gordon, because he has his daughter and wife are both named Barbara. So I had a hot second there where I thought he was talking about his daughter was coming in, but no, it's his wife is being flown in also, and it's begun to be alluded to that she's pregnant, because he's talking about hoping that she doesn't pass a test, and in this case it's the pregnancy test, because he's looking at the city around him and he's kind of like, this is kind of a rough world to start bringing a kid into, especially like being a cop and not necessarily being there, but right out the start, we see that Jim Gordon is kind of apprehensive about the city life here, whereas Bruce Wayne, on the other hand, he's very gung-ho about it. He, in his inner monologue, he mentions that he kind of wishes that he did take the train. He says he wanted to be closer to like the crime and closer to what's going on. So he's more chomping at the bit to kind of return and start this new chapter of his life, in which he's returning back to the Wayne Manor. After it says, he was 12 years abroad. Another one too here that they mentioned right at the gate. Bruce Wayne is 25 in this. Like,
I noticed that too, actually.
Looking at him when he gets off that plane, like he looks like he's definitely like mid 30s, something like that. He's like looks like he's got some life to him. But yeah, like he's 25. Like they mentioned too, like he spent like 12 years abroad. Like he was doing like they mentioned like these studies. He's still heir to the Wayne fortune, so he's it's kind of seen as this kind of like jet-setting playboy that's going to all these hotspot locations, meeting up with models, having like this lavish lifestyle. But again, man, 25, I'm turning 30 this year, so like looking at that, I'm like, oh man, what have
I thought
what have I done?
I could already be Batman for 5 years.
Exactly. Yeah, he's got 5 years on us, but I mean, Jim Gordon is he's older and he's still he's still got a lot of merit to him too. But yeah, so when yes.
Have you ever read the original like Batman #1 origin story?
Oh, like cause they mentioned it's like Detective Comics number 27 or whatever when he first comes out. No, not offhand.
It's really short. It's only a few panels, but they give this like dorky quick like backstory of like his parents get shot, and then it's like he spent the next 10 years studying science and training.
Yes.
And, like,
yeah.
That's cool, but then like when you see him coming back after 12 years, it's like, no, he went around the world. Like they made it much more in depth, and he learned different techniques from different people, different sciences, different everything. There was just a lot more variety to it instead of just teaching himself. So I thought that was deeper.
Yeah, and they don't really go into it this much. Again, with this deluxe edition, it was interesting because they had like some like small interview stuff at the end, and they mentioned how Frank Miller he wasn't that interested in that whole like those basically like those 10 12 years, like he like a lot of other stories like that will like be there with Bruce Wayne like following it, but in this one like he just kind of wants to like gloss over that. It's like here's what happened, and like he'll drop hints to it like when we go throughout this, like there's a few like times where he kind of like alludes to that training and stuff, but like beyond that it's like we don't really see it in like flashback or any kind of form of actually that time abroad. We just know here's Bruce Wayne, he spent this time abroad and he's back now. And when he comes back, the first thing he does is go to Wayne Manor, and we meet Alfred, everybody's favorite butler, watching after the manor after obviously Barbara and his Martha, yeah, how could I forget that name after the Batman Superman movie. But yeah, after they've been like long past, but he's still just kind of holding the fort for him and ready to kind of start this new life with him. And even out the gate, Bruce is kind of like, we first see him in those opening shots, like he's got like these training montages, and he's like talking to himself that like he's trained, he's got the means, he's got the wealth, but just not the method yet. So he's still taking this time when he first touches down to start training again and getting back into it. So
Well, he's doing some impressive training. He's like chopping
Exactly.
it
It
half, like
it was full on some Rocky
logs.
montage of just like splitting logs with his hands and like kicking down trees, and like it's very like this you know, even though he has the money to like basically have like a whole home gym, he's still like very like salt of the earth Rocky style of like, all right, well, I'm just gonna punch a tree. That's how I'm gonna get ready to start cleaning up these streets. So
I didn't even think about that point. That's true. He could afford the best, and he goes for
yeah,
the
exactly.
brokest. Interesting.
But then on the other side of the coin, we have Jim Gordon, and at the start here too, he's coming in on that train, and when he first touches, gets off the train, he's met by a Hare Krishna, some spiritual monk that's trying to peddle off some books to him, and he's kind of respectfully denying it or declining, and then out of nowhere, some guy who's apparently looking for Jim, just comes up and like just hand on that guy's throat, like just throttling him, getting him out of the way, just talking to Jim, no regard for this guy.
Jimmy, not Jim.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Please call me Lieutenant.
Right. Yeah.
We are met by another cop here, Lieutenant Flass. And his introduction here is definitely a lot harsher because not only assaulting this this guy who's just kind of harmless, just trying to solve his book. It's got pretty pictures from what we hear,
right.
But he's just kind of throttled and thrown to the side as Flass is giving him the lowdown of the commissioner sent him here to make sure that he got to the police station on time. Like make sure everything was running smooth, and he offers to drive him there. But on that drive, he does make a point to stop to a couple of these kids on the street that are just standing around talking, and there's this one black kid that he sees, and I guess he knows him by name, whether he's done a crime at a previous time. He's like, hey man, I'm not doing anything, I'm just kind of standing around. Flash gets out of the car and starts just beating him up too. He's shaking him down basically.
Yeah, and I think at some point in that car ride, he tells Jim how good it is to be a cop in Gotham, because it's basically implied that they just do whatever they want. They're not actually cops.
Like right out the gate here, we start seeing that in Gotham, the police force are basically almost a protected group of citizens. Like they have their own, the rules don't matter to them, and they can kind of get away with whatever, and they're allowed to just run amok and just do things like this of just hassling citizens, and there's no real repercussions. So.
In the version you read, did you get in the physical copy I own, it did not include this, but the one I read online had a police blotter page.
Yes, right at the start. Yeah, that was an interesting piece that they added at the front too, was just a way to kind of give more backstory to it.
Right.
And there's that one story at the end there, yeah.
Because in this little passage it says that there was somebody robbing a coffee shop or donut shop.
Yeah, donut shop. Yeah.
In there, and they didn't do anything. And then later that day, that cop bought his girlfriend some new jewelry or something. He was clearly in on.
Not only did was it just a brazen daylight robbery in front of the cops. They mentioned that as the guy's walking out with basically a sack with a dollar sign on it, he stops to talk with one of the cops there, and he even says this reporter that's in the police blotter mentions how they even have time to stop and laugh, so it shows how kind of the corruption and greasing the right wheels with bribes is already deep seated at this point in Gotham.
Exactly. So it's a pretty dirty town.
Yeah. And then we go to the police station. We meet Commissioner Loeb, who is this kind of older white guy, balding, bit on the pudgier side, and he's out the gates asking, he knows of Gordon's record, but he's just kind of at this point wondering, will he play ball? He says, we know that you're a good cop, and we've seen your stuff, but it's all about loyalty in the force, and making sure that you get along with the boys, they're usually referred to as this inner group of police officers. So,
and it's implied in that scene that at his previous job, Gordon had done something to kind of ruin that trust between him and the police officers. He what's the word I'm looking for? Called some cop out for doing something, or publicized that some cop was taking a bribe, something like that. He
basically turned internal affairs in on another fellow cop, and at this point, and like in forces like that, like that's seen as a no-no, because like even if it's the right thing to do, like you're kind of breaking up this insider group that they have. And yeah, once we see them, we then cut back to Bruce, and at this point he's sitting in his car. He's done some of his training, and he is saying how he's gonna basically gonna get a lowdown of the area, like he's doing a reconnaissance mission. He's I think taken makeup to like change his skin complexion, he mentions. He's donned like this just general kind of vagrant look of like just an oversized jacket, like like just some beanie on his head, and he's sure to make sure that he has one distinguishing figure, that which is this makeup scar that he's added across his face that just like spans from like eye to chin. So he's donning this kind of persona to blend in with the underworld here.
And I really like that Frank Miller starts right away to show how intellectual that Bruce Wayne is, that he's going to, get into this criminal underworld this way, that he thinks about this stuff, that I don't know, that inner monologue, I think really, it does a lot for you, because you see why he's giving himself the scar.
Yeah.
So that people notice it. And it's
exactly.
Yeah. And also I wanted to say in the previous scene with Gordon and Loeb, I love the way Frank Miller writes dialogue for his characters. Like, they have very distinguished voices, and like,
yes.
The Loeb guy, like, he always asks a question and then answers the question
exactly
himself.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's like good writing, that everybody has a distinct personality and voice.
Yeah, there's other characters in here too that one in this next scene too, that like they just, the way that he writes them, they always they have their like distinguishing like almost like features in their voice, whether it's like the physical way in which it's written and like there's accents on it, or just like just the conversational patterns that they have of Loeb, just kind of this he's high at the top of the chain, and he just kind of talks basically to hear himself talk. Like, he'll ask a question just to answer it as just again just to kind of almost condescend and talk down to somebody, because he doesn't care about your answer. He's already got the answer for you. So
right, you're gonna play ball, right, Jimmy?
Exactly. Oh, of course you are, Jimmy. Yeah, you're a good guy, right?
Bruce Wayne in his car going on his reconnaissance mission.
Yeah, and then he gets out and starts walking because he doesn't want to get too much attention. So he's like like, all right, well like I'm like about 12 blocks out. I'm just gonna walk the rest of the way. And as he's walking, this was the part where it definitely started hitting to me a lot more home of the kind of parallels with Watchmen. Because he's walking through these seedy parts of the city. He talks about like on his way to his destination, he comes across, there's like these different like homeless parks. There's these people like groups of like junkies that are like hassling him for money. And he eventually does get to the neighborhood that he's looking for. It's not mentioned necessarily why he's going to these places, more just that he's alluded to in his monologues that like he's coming here to try and find out some information, to find somebody, whatever it may be. But when he gets there, it's very much like this kind of cliche 80s like Dirty Harry like downtown area, where it's like every building, every billboard is like XXX live girls, like all that stuff. We're in like some seedy red light district where it's just like pimps and prostitutes just kind of controlling the streets there.
And if you, again, going back to the the fact that we read the deluxe edition, Frank Miller was saying in an interview before he wrote this that he had read a Batman story previously, like when he was a kid, and he really got this idea of this dark, seedy underworld Gotham, as opposed to the Adam West, Burt Ward Batman.
Like it's like he even mentioned where it's like Batman doesn't laugh. Like it's not supposed to be like this kind of like bright and like silly gimmicky place. Like he mentions like these pillars of concrete, and like it's just nothing but like rain on buildings, and like it's just constantly just perpetually gloomy there. And he definitely pulls it out.
Also in the beginning, the very beginning, when Bruce is flying in his inner monologue, he says that from like this vantage point, you'd think it's like a great city. Everything looks so clean, but he's like, once you get down to the ground level, it's gritty. And then the first time you get to see him walking through, it's this gritty.
Exactly.
Gritty,
you see, like just
it really drives that home. So I like it.
It was funny. At this at this point when I was reading it, it reminded me so much of Taxi Driver that I basically started listening to the theme song from Taxi Driver to get that
Oh,
full
really?
immersion of just being there. Because yeah, I mean definitely the way in which it was being written and drawn too, like it definitely helped embody that this this seedy 80s nothing but crime street corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as he's walking along, he comes across, like a bunch of prostitutes on the side that are soliciting him, and one in particular that stands out. That's this, very young girl. Like, it's hard to tell. It's like if she's even like fully a teenager yet, like the way it's kind of
Right.
drawn in her dialogue. He even stops and asks, how old are you? She's, her response is, however old you want me to be.
So
Um,
weird.
so yeah, exactly. So it's kind of bringing home like that, like there's, this deep rooted troubles in Gotham where, like these people are either being sold into it or whatever, like they're kind of forced into, these tough positions. And as he starts, asking her more questions and, trying to like, it seems like maybe even help her out. This guy in a zoot suit and like full brimmed fedora comes out of out of the darkness and starts hassling him, saying why are you asking these questions? Who are you? What's going on? Um,
What does he call him? Because Frank Miller always uses weird slang in his writing. It's a reference for a cop. It's like fuzz, but it's not fuzz.
oh yeah. I forget what it was offhand, but yeah, he uses like some like period appropriate, like he's called not narc, but some vice, like what
It's
are you
vice. Yeah,
vice? You I could smell the vice on you or whatever like that. He says.
Yeah.
So yeah, like he's immediately kind of and he responds, he's not a cop, which isn't wrong, although pretty similar, but like it starts creating this air of tension there. Like they're talking, gets turning into a shouting match. A lady from one of the windows named Selena kind of comes out because she hears this commotion and is like saying like hey like cut it out, like just basically like rolling her eyes at men, like that they're just like yelling out here instead of doing anything kind of productive. And Bruce is kind of taking this opportunity as a chance to kind of show off in some ways. He's been at home testing, and now here he is, out on the streets, and he kind of gets his first brush with a confrontation. Even though in his monologue he mentions, he wasn't kind of looking for one, or he may have went too far and like aggravated and provoked the guy, but he sees it as an opportunity to kind of see if he's got what it takes.
Right, and I do like that it kind of shows his youth and arrogance and
Yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Inexperience.
Yeah,
he has no
exactly.
experience. So yeah, like I've got this plan. I'm going to go in here and do this, and it turns. I mean, it goes bad. We're going to find out.
It goes pretty south pretty quick. Yeah.
If you think about the Batman we know and love, he wouldn't do something like that because he's a trained expert by the time we get introduced to the character years later.
Yeah, exactly. But in this case, the young, arrogant Bruce Wayne, he starts provoking the guy, they get into a fist fight, he's able to beat him, but this younger girl, like, ends up siding with her pimp, and, like, she just pulls out a knife and, like, stabs him in the leg. Things start, like, getting a lot more chaotic, and police start showing up, at which point they even open fire on him. Like, one guy, one of the cops, it's two cops that come up, like one tells me like not to move and like just ends up shooting him even though he's standing still, and the other guy's like, dang, he wasn't even moving, but at that point he didn't care. He's like, oh, it's just some vagrant, like let him bleed out, it doesn't really matter. And they toss him into the car, start taking him to the to turn him in, but Bruce Wayne, starts coming to because he's having that inner monologue of, like, it's not, it can't end like this, like, I'm not going to just, like bleed out. I can't let them find my ID or find out who I am, so he just kind of basically talks himself into not bleeding out and like coming to back from unconsciousness, and he breaks out of his cuffs and like starts going at it with these cops in the car, and like one fires off a gun. He grabs the wheel, and he's like, all right, if you guys can get out now if you want. They still try to fight him off, and he ends up just crashing the car into I believe it was like the side of the bridge or something like that. Creates a big wreck. Car goes up in flame. And here we start seeing some of the early, fights that he has within his, his head of, like these guys, they didn't necessarily do anything. They have, families. And we get a news report saying that, like there was this cop car that was overturned on the bridge, explosion, but, these two cops were found 30 feet away, unharmed, So,
Right. Yeah. Because he's not a killer, and he gets that established right from the beginning.
yeah. And then we get, oh yeah, at this point too, then we still see, like right at the end, we see Gordon, who's been kind of hassled by the different Lieutenant Flass and quote unquote again the boys. They, in his short time there at the police force, they could see that like he's not really one of them. He's not really playing ball. He's like turning away bribes and stuff like that, or even like kind of turning in people who have like accepted bribes, and he's kind of getting this name for himself as this almost goody two shoes cop, and
Right.
Lieutenant Flass and the boys aren't really having any of that.
Yeah, the other thing we forgot to mention, as far as the way the format is, there's dates in the top left corner every couple of pages, and so it kind of gives you the time frame that everything's working in. So by this point, it starts in January. It's already been a couple months, so Gordon's established, even though we've only seen him a couple pages.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's been implied that he's been trying to make some changes within the police force and writing other cops up for taking bribes and stuff that otherwise wasn't happening.
Yeah, and at this point, like I said, they've taken note of that, and they're not really having any of it. So they meet up with in the garage of the police station. Jim's going to his car, and these four masked assailants kind of come out with baseball bats and try and teach him a lesson.
Yeah, and then another thing with Gordon, the first time we meet him and he's talking, or he's on that car ride with Flass, and Flass pulls over and beats up the little kid. And Gordon's in her monologue, he's like, "Oh, I can tell by the way he's fighting, he's a Green Beret."
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He sees, because Flass isn't, like he's no pushover. He's this like very tall, very big, imposing guy. And like as Gordon points out, like, he's clearly the way in which he fights. Gordon was studying him, and he sees that he's had like Green Beret specifically training. So he's definitely keeps that in mind.
And even when the four assailants come in the garage, he knows right away. He's like, "Oh, they tried to get my attention. Some guys."
Exactly. Yeah.
And so he turns and hits them. And I like that. I'd love to go back and read stories before this to see if Frank Miller really changed Jim Gordon, or if he was already this like badass cop.
Yeah.
Because he, like Batman, like has knowledge and skills. He's not just some cop. Like he's an expert at what he does. Yeah. And Frank Miller does a really good job of driving this home with this inner monologue and showing everything that they're realizing as it's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because we also find out too that Gordon himself has had some military training too, so like he's not completely inexperienced, and on that coupled with his time on the force, where like he could even spot out he's like running these tactics in his mind as it's happening, so he's ready for it. But he mentions he's a little out of practice, so even though he stands his own at the beginning of the fight, they eventually overpower him, and are able to knock him down, beat him up, but to the point of that he mentions not to having to be hospitalized. Because he doesn't, whoever is beating him up, it's more to send a message at this point. And exactly. And one of the assailants, when they're laughing, he could even tell from the laugh, he's like, "Oh, that's Flass's laugh," so he, at this point, even at the start, he kind of knew something was up. He was able to put together, that this was basically a warning message from Flass and the other the boys about how they feel about somebody on the team that isn't willing to play ball.
Right. And prior to this, you saw Flass when he was talking to Loeb. Loeb even tells him, like, wait to do that until I'm out of town. So
exactly. Yeah.
Unless he's coming towards me. And it's like, damn, this place is so corrupt. It's
that they even like they make a science of it it's gonna look bad on me, so wait till I'm out of town, there's kind of like plausible deniability at that point, and it doesn't fall back on me or look bad on me, but he's like just wait a few weeks and I'll be gone. So but it looks like Flass couldn't really wait, and they end up beating up Jim, but again not to the point of needing hospitalization, but enough to send him a message. But even though Jim gets the message, he kind of starts going out for his own revenge on them. And then we next see him basically kind of stalking the other police members until they meet up at another fellow officer's house for the night to like to have their poker game or whatever.
Yeah, and it's cool because again, like it's inside of Jim Gordon, I don't think you see in any other like interpretation of him where he's like, I'm not going to take your crap. I'm going to be alpha dog, and I'm going to hunt you down now.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's one thing, like if he would have, like just taken it in stride, like he knew who it was, and like just kind of like wait for his time to, like maybe have some sort of way of getting back, in by the books. But in this place, like he takes it and he flips it on them too.
Yeah, he even says like on his way there, he's like, I'm not going to go home and let Barbara see me like this. Like he's got pride. Like he's a man's man, and I like this Jim Gordon.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fun iteration of him that shows, like that. Yeah, he's not willing to kind of, like just let that slide. So he takes it into his own hands, and we see him outside, that police officer's house. And he basically stakes it out, and he waits, like one by one for them to, start trickling out. The first guy leaves, and he mentions, he knows who it was. Like, oh, he's probably, getting home early to go to his wife, but like he's leaving enough time to stop by his girlfriend's house too. So like, yeah, as he's watching these cops come out, he's kind of listing the ways in which he knows their kind of personal corruptions, or their faults that we have. Like he knows that this one guy is basically cheating on his wife, and is just kind of like throwing that back in their face. But like we see that he's not here for them. He's waiting again one by one for them all to trickle out until the last person to start drunkenly stumbling to his car is Lieutenant Flass.
Yeah, and from there, I mean, Flass drunkenly drives down the road. He almost hits a mailbox, doesn't turn his light
up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It paints a good picture of like how he's just like coming out of this house party, like just stumbling and then fumbling.
Right, and so then Gordon follows him a couple blocks down, and eventually just rams him off the damn road, man.
Yeah, he says like, all right, like I haven't seen a car for a house or car for like the last few miles. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, all right, like it's secluded enough where nobody's gonna get hurt, and he just knocks him off the road.
Yeah, and so the next thing he does is, I mean, it's one of my favorite things in any Batman book, let alone like my favorite Jim Gordon moment.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite Jim Gordon moment. Can I?
Yeah, yeah.
So, Flass gets out of the car, and they, he realizes it's Gordon. And so they put their guns down, but Gordon has a baseball bat. And then the inner monologue, he's like, it's been about 5 years since I fought a Green Beret. I better give him a handicap. And he throws him the bat.
Exactly.
Like, what? Like you're thinking like he's gonna attack Flass with the bat, and he's like, no, I'm gonna give you the bat.
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna need it.
Yeah, and so then Flass attacks him, and it's just it's a few panels of Gordon just taking it to him like hard.
Yeah, because even though he is drunk, like he's still got like you said, like he's this kind of like tall, imposing guy with like a lot of force behind his punches, like, and he still puts up a fight, but Jim, fortunately, like now that he's not getting snuck up on and beaten up, like 4-1, he's able to show that he can handle his own.
Absolutely. And then he completely embarrasses Flass in like the best way possible. He strips him naked after he knocks him down, or knocks him out, handcuffs him, and then throws a gun in the woods so it'll run. It's like, yeah, so he's not going to tell anybody that I did this to him, but he's going to know I did it to him. And that's gonna keep him in line. That's his theory.
Yeah, he's definitely calling his bluff because, like, he mentioned he knows that, like, he's an arrogant guy. He cares about his image, especially in front of the other police officers. So he's not gonna say like, oh, I was like beaten up. He mentions that like he'll probably mention that like he was overpowered by like 10 guys or something like that. Like caught off guard. But, he's never gonna admit that he was beaten in a fair fight by somebody who's kind of seen as lesser than him.
Fair fight. He had a baseball bat.
Exactly. Yeah. That's stacked in his odds, and he still lost. Yeah.
Yeah. So he can't tell the truth, but now he knows if he ever does something to Barbara or the kid, he's in.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the last thing that we kind of see here is after that last Gordon kind of vignette, we see Bruce Wayne, who's at this point bleeding back at Wayne Manor. He's kind of stumbled his way back into like his dad's study, and he's just kind of contemplating, well, if this is where I die, then this is how it's going to happen, like just kind of bleeding out after his first attempt on the streets. He's just kind of thinking to himself and reminiscing, and he's having this kind of dialogue in front of like a bust of his father, like just kind of sitting on the mantelpiece, kind of wondering where it all went wrong. He kind of thinks back to that fateful night after watching the Mark of Zorro with his family, when they're kind of approached by this, he mentions this kind of scared criminal with a gun in an alleyway, and when in which we all know what happens. He shoots both of them and like leaves little Bruce Wayne there, as an orphan, and that's kind of all flashing before his mind. If how do I make them afraid of me? Like I came back here to try and correct what happened, but like I don't have a way to make them afraid. And at this point, some act of God, a bat flies in through the window and just kind of perches upon this marble bust of his father, and he takes that as a sign. He's like, yes, father, like I'll take the the form of a bat to instill fear in them.
Yeah, and first of all, I got to say that some of the best pages of Batman.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's so cool to see that thought process he goes through to like make that transition from Bruce Wayne to Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the monologue of the story so far, he's trying to find a way to strike fear into these criminals, and he doesn't know how to do it. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you and point out, have you read The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller's other work? Which
yes, a long time ago also, but yeah, like that was some classic Frank Miller.
Well, he mirrors in Dark Knight Returns, which he wrote first. At one point, Bruce is trying to figure out if he should become Batman again, and he's sitting in a chair, and a bat flies through his window.
Yeah,
and he does this to like set it off too. So I thought it was like, I mean, yeah, it's his own creation, but still like
sure, yeah. I mean, he definitely kind of references back to that too, because a few points throughout the story we get a lot of these kind of shots from like news anchors where we're getting like a news report of like what's going on to kind of like give some explanation of what's been happening, but it's done in the same style as Dark Knight Returns, where it's like talking head reporter in front of usually kind of like a like just some symbol or something like that's going on in the background as they're just kind of giving an explanation of what happened. And like it's done very much in the style of Dark Knight Returns. So like seeing that kind of these different forms kind of returning in references to his other works is pretty interesting too.
Right. And then I found myself really liking all the dialogue up until the very last word bubble he has in that issue, where he says like, I will take the form of a bat. I was like, that's a little too much, because right before it, just like, yes, father. I'm like, it should have ended right there. It's what he was talking about. Like, he didn't even say dressed as a bat. I'm like,
a little hokey, but I mean, like that's always the thing is, like in the same way that they even had this kind of retelling to begin with, was because like a lot of these characters are coming from that golden age where it was very, very simplistic, very kind of campy and hokey, but like there's certain things about the whole Batman story that it's kind of hard to overlook or see as being a little bit silly, and especially with this very like melodramatic, almost operatic, this mournful monologue that he's having, and then like a crash from the window and a bat just perches on this marble bust of his dead father. He's like, yes, I will become a bat.
Yeah, but I love it. I mean, I still love it. It's just that last bubble, I was like, one bubble too much, Frank.
Exactly. Yeah. But like we said, like that's the end of the first chapter. A lot going on in just a quarter of the story there. We see the kind of the rise of Bruce Wayne, and like we get introduced to Jim Gordon, and what's going on in his life between like his wife and starting to have a kid, and like all of the worries that's going on in his life too. So but then chapter 2 we start right off the bat with Gordon on his way to a hostage situation.
Yes. Trying to think how this goes from there.
Yeah, it was he was going to a hostage situation where it was this kind of crazed guy he has apparently, like they mentioned, like at least 3 kids being held at gunpoint in this apartment building.
And he just got released from Arkham Asylum like 2 weeks prior.
Yeah.
Like even like his word bubbles like don't make sense, and then they're like, he's not making any sense, and you're like, oh yeah, he's crazy.
Yeah, so they start taking it as you know, like all right, well, we don't know what to do here, so they call in Officer Brandon and his SWAT team that they even refer to as basically like, you know, his Gestapo, like, you know, like these kind of gun crazy, you know, like looking for kind of violence and action SWAT members, you know, like, so they've taken this this hostage situation that they felt has kind of like gone south because they don't really know how to, you know, communicate with this guy. So they take that as a means for like, all right, well, we've exhausted, you know, like the negotiation aspect of it. So, you know, like, let's just, you know, call in the big guns.
Right. And as soon as Gordon realizes that's what's happening, he like freaks out because he doesn't want, he knows what's going to happen. It's going to be a slaughter. So he's like, I got to get there first and calm this situation myself. So as soon as he shows up, he gets there right before Brandon and he takes control. He's like, nope, I'm going in there, puts his gun down, goes in like a boss.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, you know, he's able to, you know, like, you know, manage it, even though like we, again, like in his thoughts, you know, like we see that he's scared, he's nervous, you know, like he's trembling, you know, he doesn't like using guns. He doesn't want to, but he knows that, you know, like it's kind of, you know, a necessity at this point, you know, cause he's there to try and, you know, save these kids. And fortunately he's able to.
Yeah, and the way he does it is cool. He just like approaches the guy calmly, and then as soon as he gets close enough, you wham right in the face. And
exactly, yeah, knocks him out. You know, like you know, the kids are fine. You know, this guy, you know, who, you know, granted he took, you know, like these kids hostage, but you know, like we see that, you know, he's mentally unstable. You know, like it's not like you know, some act of, you know, pure violence. You know, like he's able to try and, you know, diffuse the situation without it, you know, just becoming, you know, like a reason for using like excessive force on him.
Right.
And then after that, we see it's, you know, him with Barbara, you know, like they're kind of like, I think, watching a news report on it. And, you know, like he's just trying to like unwind from the day at this point. Like she's giving him a massage. And it's funny because one of the things that I liked in this one, too, is we get a reference to Superman. Superman exists in this world, you know, because obviously this is, you know, like they're trying to restart the whole continuity of DC. So it's not like some one-off story. We get mentions of, you know, she mentions that, you know, like you don't have to go all the way to Metropolis to, you know, have, you know, the hands of a man of steel, you know, like, you know, working your back. Which I thought was, you know, like a small reference, but, you know, like just a nice way to add some like world building to it. You know, like we get to see that, you know, Superman exists and is a known entity at this point.
You know, I was going to bring this up a few minutes ago. Harvey Dent has a role in this. Was he in the first issue, or does he not get introduced till issue 2? I couldn't remember.
Not as actively. I think it's issue 2 where we start actually seeing him in his office more. But yeah, chapter 1, I believe they definitely do mention, you know, like you know, a district attorney.
Harvey Dent.
Yeah, assistant district attorney. Yeah. They won't let him get any higher than that. Yeah.
Right. And I, like you just said with the world building, I like that Frank Miller did that you have a young up and coming Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne's only 25. Selena Kyle's not even Catwoman yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just some dominatrix at this point. Yeah, like working on a street corner.
Yeah, exactly. Oh wow, I guess she is. You're right. Plays the whip. You think of that.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of subtlety that, you know, like it all builds up to something.
Right.
And yeah, this is when we first, after Jim Gordon's basically kind of like first shown like, you know, heroic moment, we start seeing Bruce Wayne's, you know, transition into Batman and his attempt at like a first kind of heroic moment. He runs in on these like home invaders. They're like climbing out the side of an apartment building on like the fire escape, you know, like, so it's like this small, you know, like metal ladder and platform area, and he just kind of swoops in from above.
Yeah, I thought, man, I actually thought it was a little lackluster, to be honest. Like I don't know, you turn the page and he's just like over a building looking at these kids, and it's like, oh, you didn't have some like grand entrance, like.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, we don't get to see his grand entrance, but they certainly do. Like they're taken aback, and that's kind of like his first showings of, you know, like, hey, this is what it's like, you know, when he's trying to actually instill fear in them.
Yeah, and he even says like right away when they look at him, they freeze, and he's like, that gives me all the time in the world to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
So it scares them. So yeah, Oh, hello?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So you know what? I'm sorry to do this. I gotta grab my charger. This drained my battery, and my phone's gonna die. Give me 1 second.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, we'll pass the time here. But yeah, I'll just so in this first scene, like it's Batman's first attempt at trying to deal with these hoodlums, and he's, like I said, he's out here. He mentions like 20 stories up on this apartment building. It's this dangerous situation, and he takes it as his opportunity to swoop down and take advantage of it, and he's able to catch them by surprise. And like he knocks one of them over, but he again, like he's still like a kind of
Amateur.
getting out all the rough edges, and he doesn't know his own strength, and he ends up like knocking one of these kids basically off and over the railing. And he has to take the split-second decision to like grab him by his ankle as he's dangling from this above, like again, like this 20-story building. And but he's still this crazy guy in a bat costume that kind of caught them by surprise. So like the other two guys are just like wailing on him. One of them even like tries to smash him over the head with the TV that they were stealing.
Yeah, and he even says, he's like, I'm like holding on to like his friend's ankle, and he like
exactly.
hits it. He's like,
they don't realize that he's the only one that's keeping him alive at this point.
Yeah, and so he gets cracked on the head with the TV, but then he kicks that dude and like breaks 3 of his ribs, he says. So he's out, and then he waits for the other dude to swing on him, and he times it right, knocks him out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he kind of collapses because he didn't drop the guy, and he's like, I'm finished. And then there's this real subtle thing, another subtle callback that I don't know if you noticed. I love this. Okay, in Dark Knight Returns, because Frank Miller wrote that.
Yeah.
Whenever he does something stupid, his inner monologue in that, he goes, lucky old man.
Yeah,
and in this, he's like,
he calls him lucky amateur.
Lucky amateur. And I'm like,
exactly.
Oh, it's so subtle, but I love that.
Yeah, it's great because again, like this is his kind of his debut. Like it's his first time out on the streets as the Batman.
Yeah.
And like the first thing that we see is him like bumbling, like almost accidentally, killing a kid. Almost getting they almost get the upper hand on him too, but like at the end of the day, he kind of succeeded, but he still recognizes that there's still a lot of progress to be made.
Right. Yeah. And from there, where does he go? What does he do from there?
We then cut back to Gordon. He's in a morning briefing, and this is kind of like the police's first they're sitting down and discussing, like this Batman, this large bat. The best thing too is in the background, they have like these artist renditions of like these Batmen. And one of them is just straight up a bat, like man-sized bat that's just standing up on its 2 hind legs. Like these are like the different, like presumably like the different like descriptions that people like, must have given over the time. Cause again, multiple days have passed at this point, and like presumably more robberies and like petty, street crimes have been stopped. And like, these are basically either like witnesses accounts and like artist renditions of the Batman, and it kind of runs the gamut from like, all right, that's clearly the Batman that we know, to just straight up man bat area of like, here is a bat on 2 legs just standing up.
In that scene, I'd have to go back and get the exact quote, but one officer says, oh, in the last X amount of weeks, X amount of crimes have
exactly. Yeah. So like it's the police says they've taken note of it, because like at this point, like it's becoming noticeable. It's not just this one-time event. It's multiple crimes have been stopped by it. And it's interesting too because much like those drawings of almost peering into how the public is viewing him, even the police force itself is kind of divided on who or what this Batman is, because we then get Lieutenant Flass's story of a crime that was broken up by him, and we definitely he's leaning more, again, like we know Flass at this point, like we saw, Gordon mentioned, like how he would definitely describe the fight that went down between them. So like we start getting this like very embellished story of I believe it was Lieutenant Flass was like trying to break up some drug ring. As he's telling it, we get to see through the art what actually happened, and we see like Flass like glad handing like this like pimp or drug dealer like like exchange of money, exchanging hands. Well, in the background, a bat kind of swoops down and kind of breaks up the drug ring. But the way that Flass tells it, like he was there trying to break it up himself, and like he was succeeding when like this vigilante just kind of comes out of nowhere, like looking like a bat with, like 30-foot wings and, like all
Right.
these, like
He's got claws.
again, exactly. Yeah. He's got claws.
Oh, the guy. So in the art, you see a cop is shooting, and it goes through his cape and flashes.
He's like, I shot him, and bullets just go right through him.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What I really like about that police briefing is talk about grounding it in reality. It's like, well, if there was a vigilante going around, you're damn right the cops would take notice, and they would also notice the patterns. And in that briefing, they say, well, he operates in random neighborhoods, but he only operates between these hours.
Yeah, exactly. I believe the person who told that one character that we didn't touch on yet was Detective Essen. Yeah, the female detective on the police force.
Oh, you and I are gonna have a little discussion about
yeah, she definitely kind of comes back later in the story multiple times, but like we first see her, and she's kind of the voice of reason in some ways during this. Like she's discussing like like you mentioned, like yeah, there's a pattern to this. Like this isn't just some random stuff. Like she's seemingly the only one that's actually kind of like taking notice of this in a bigger way.
Also, did you notice they mentioned that she's from Chicago and that Gordon was also from there?
Yeah. Gordon was like basically transferred out from Chicago, or like they spent some time basically at the same time there. But getting back to the to Flass's story, there was one detail that I like too, where he mentioned it when he first attacked those kids. When he first tried to break up the thieves there, attacking makes it sound so bad. He's just beating up kids. But when he was at the drug ring, and then also this, like they mentioned like this growl that he gives, like it's almost like one of his tools of striking fear is this like guttural growl that he gives. And one of the subtle allusions to like his time abroad and like the training and experience that gave him is like like he's like this I gave out this growl that like I brought basically like all the way from Africa, like whether it's like some species that he saw there, or like if it was like some method of like fighting in wars that like maybe he learned from some warriors down there too. Like they don't give the specifics, but like just the kind of a subtle allusion to the fact that like hey, like he's kind of implementing all that he's learned from all around as kind of tools for this.
Yeah, no, I noticed that too. And for such a small thing, it did have a big impact, because it brought me back to what I was saying earlier, where like he went around the world for 12 years and trained. He didn't just do this himself in his basement like the old origin story had you believe.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really like that. I noticed that too. I took it as like it was a hunting technique, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's an
exactly. Yeah, it's just a smart kind of way to like, and then also like I feel like like sure in the movies we definitely get like a very gravelly voiced Batman, like maybe that's kind of people's way of bringing that to like the movies, but like I feel like we don't really get like just straight growling when he's attacking. Like I feel like that was kind of an interesting kind of like a character trait that they gave him, like a way in which like he kind of attacks the situation. It's just like straight making them believe like it's easy to understand why like people would think that it was like a bat with legs at this point if it was this big unwieldy creature that's growling at you. So
right. And I like that in all the Frank Miller Batman works, he does do a very good job of Bruce Wayne, or Batman is this like larger than life, like unrealistic, like giant man. It's not human. So when people see it, they say it's not a he, it's an
exactly.
it.
Yeah, that's
it's not human, and it's that overwhelming, everything about him. So I like that they brought that into it.
Mm-hmm. So after that, we then go to Batman is crashing another party, but this time it's a literal party. We see him outside of the Commissioner Loeb's, whether it's his house or where, but it's some kind of lavish estate. They even have like the big roundabout driveway with like a bunch of chauffeurs, kind of like waiting in their respective like limousines and like Rolls Royces for the party to be over. So we definitely know that we're kind of brushing elbows with Gotham's elites here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like again how they're showing the tactic. Like he's going around one by one to the chauffeurs and like knocking them out with a trank, and then disarming them. And then he already knows that there's one guard at the door with a machine gun.
Yeah,
and just nice tactical details that, of course, Batman would do if this was real. Very
exactly.
realistic.
Yeah. And while he's kind of outside there, kind of scoping it out, we hear for the first time the name of Falcone.
Yes.
That's one of the people present there, and this is like it's a name that we know now, but like at the time, I think this was like the first introduction to Carmine Falcone and
Right.
the Falcone crime syndicate.
Yeah, and unfortunately for me, I had seen Batman Begins before I read this the first time. Batman Begins draws heavily from this, so I read that and was like, oh, the guy from the movie. But you're
exactly,
right.
Yeah.
Reading this for the first time in 1986, this was the introduction to the character. So and he plays a big role in Batman lore, especially the early years of Batman from here on out. So.
Yeah, because he's definitely one of the big names in Gotham. We don't know it yet, but he's part of, again, like the crime syndicate, the Falcones. He's referred to as the Roman, which we see like later on to like his whole like penthouse estate, like on top of like some building, is like modeled after like Roman architecture. Like it's got the pillars. It looks like the Pantheon on top of like some modern skyscraper that he has like rigged out as like a bathhouse, and like when we see interiors from there, it's nothing but like like Roman sculptures and like legionnaire like uniforms and like armor all over the place. So, like he definitely leans heavily into this almost caricature that he's created for himself.
It's just like Ozymandias's obsession with
exactly the Egyptians.
It is.
That's another good way to like have like these very cartoony comic book characters, but in a kind of more subtle and realistic way. Like the idea of like somebody who's like that, if that's their whole shtick, they'll kind of like lean into that by like having that be like the architecture and stuff. So like it was an interesting kind of way to introduce that character and kind of have more a distinct look for him.
Yeah, I liked it. And so during this meal that they're having at this party, though, at least what I got from it, the banter is like, some people don't know if the Batman's good or bad. Like they don't really have an opinion on him yet. It's
Commissioner Loeb, Falcone. There's mention of, he's not there, but there's talk of Harvey Dent. Like usually kind of in the pejorative type way of like they don't like him, and he's kind of getting in the way of their business. And another person who's kind of an unknown is Batman. Like is he, is it something that we should allow? Commissioner Loeb seems to be fine that it's good for the people of the city's morale. Like like he's kind of cleaning up like petty criminals, but like the implication also being that they'll be fine though, because they're too high up on the chain at this point, where it's like let this guy in a cape kind of run around for now, because he's not really interfering with us.
Well, it even mentions that it's like distracting people from what they're doing. So
exactly,
it's like,
So let them run with that. But little do they know, we've got Batman lurking outside, ready to spring his trap, in which he throws in smoke bombs, and he delivers the message that I gave at the start of this episode too, of that they were they were eating Gotham's wealth, its spirits, and he lets them know that their time is over, like that nobody here is safe, and again in a very dramatic way too, because it's nothing but lit by like whatever food that they have like over a fire, and he snuffs it out at the end of his speech, just kind of like presumably recedes back into the darkness, letting them think about what he said. So it's a very dramatic way of getting his point across.
I like it though. I mean, it's the theatrics is part of Batman. You're gonna dress up as a bat, you better be dramatic and theatric like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's I don't know, I was a fan of that scene too, so
it's a good one. And not to like steal directly from Batman Begins, but which borrowed from this book, but the whole thing is that Batman's supposed to be a symbol, and I feel like in scenes like that, that's really what they're trying to get across, that like he's representing that like this is stopping, I'm the force that's going to stand in your way, I'm what's going to put an end to this, and it's an important scene. I like it, even though they don't really go back to any of those. Oh, I guess you do go back to Carmine's later, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, we see him, but like a lot of the other people, like whether it's presumed that they that they got the message or whatever it may be, but like he deals with them directly, not like just like going around and not like going for like, you know, like their foot soldiers or anything like that. Like he goes, you know, like straight to them, you know, and just lets them
Right.
know, like, you know, hey, you know, it's gonna end here. So here's your one warning. So
Yeah. So, yeah, he stuffs out that fire,
and then we get back to more Batman action. We cut to at the bad side of town. There's this lady, you know, like presumably like in her 20s or whatever, like walking around Gotham at midnight, which is, you know, in according to local people, like that's tantamount to suicide. You know, like that you if you're walking around the bad side of town at midnight, you know, like there's nothing good could happen. So we get to see why, because she's basically attacked by, you know, this mugger as she's, you know, going for a midnight walk. And it's interesting, you know, again, we get to see how little the police force do, because in this side of town, apparently the police set up like a bunch of traps, they refer to them as, like these police officers that are kind of either pretending to be like homeless people, or, you know, just kind of like hiding around in the alleyways waiting to, you know, presumably help. But, you know, like as she's being attacked, you know, like Batman eventually ends up saving her, but like we get his monologue of, you know, like here's Officer so and so, you know, like drunk on the stoop, you know, like falling asleep and, you know, not helping. Here's these, you know, these two officers in this sedan that's right next, you know, like not doing anything, not whether it's because they don't know or don't care, but, you know, like showing how kind of, you know, futile or like almost impotent the police force is in this town.
okay, wait. I have to go back and reread that because I got something totally different from that scene.
What'd you get?
I thought he was saying, I thought Batman was implying that they were setting a trap for him and he wasn't biting.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought because they're like, because he says like the woman, she walks in the heels too good, and then I think he's implying that the guy who mugs her is an undercover cop.
Oh, maybe I read that wrong, but yeah, that could be the case too. Of yeah, like, you know, using it as a way to kind of baiting him. Yeah,
out. And yeah, I thought that's what it was.
Maybe it's speaks to the Gotham police force that, you know, like very easily it could have been that, you know, like that this was you know, them, you know, just falling asleep at the job. But yeah, like I think you're probably right too, that you know, as a way to try and bait him, that yeah, like
yeah, I don't know. Now I'm gonna go back and reread that. And
no, you very well may be right on that one. That's a good catch.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to go. Oh yeah, we'll next, you know, tomorrow when we meet or whenever we do this next, we'll have reread.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll pull the page up. We'll read it live. But then after that, shortly after that, we cut back to Falcone, and apparently he didn't get the message from Batman the first time, but, you know, he surely did this time, and we find him again in this kind of lavishly adorned, almost basically like a palace that he like lives in his bedroom. You know, he's got like lined with like Roman soldiers along the walls, like these marble statues, and we find him like hog-tied and naked again, you know, in the middle of his bed. You know, and I get presumably like, you know, his soldiers or his, you know, his butlers kind of come in and ask him what happened, and they tell him that that his Rolls Royce was dumped into the river recently. Not only does he know that happened, but he knows like exactly like what dock and what time it happened. So he knows that Batman was, you know, there to send him a message again.
Yeah, and also what's with Frank Miller and hog tying naked? He's got some weird themes throughout all of his writing, and now I'm gonna.
It's an effective way to send a message.
I guess it is. I'm gonna have to add that to my repertoire next time I send a message. I take a page from Frank's book.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean that, and you know, pushing a like, you know, like $1 million car into the river is a good way to do it too. But you know.
Oh, and then antagonizing the person by telling which dock and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How it happened. Yeah, it's pretty good.
But yeah, then next, it's back to Gordon, and at this point, Gordon is talking with Essex in the car. They're driving and chatting, and you know, again, like Batman has kind of been out in the loose for a while now, and they're speculating on who it is. And at this point in time, Gordon is leaning towards as Harvey Dent. He had stopped by his you know, his offices before and chatted with him, and while he was there, you know, he's kind of probing with questions, and at some point, like, you know, he even sees that he's got like weights in his office, so he's, you know, like, oh wow, these are some heavy weights for you, huh? He's, you know, just kind of learning more about him, almost Columbo style, like with these probing questions, you know, kind of open-ended, kind of like playing the fool in some ways. And right. He takes this as, you know, a way of, well, you know, like Harvey Dent, he's definitely obviously tough on the criminals. And apparently, like he's bodybuilding to a degree that, like maybe would explain like, he's fit enough to possibly be Batman. Like does he fit the description? So
well, and then they bring up the fact that all the gadgets Batman has, and
yeah, that,
like,
that he's got the money too as a possibility maybe, but
for Bruce Wayne to be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Which I actually really like that scene, because again, going back to like the practicality and grounding it in reality, like if there was a vigilante running around and you were a police force, who would you suspect? Well, the district attorney, that's a good option.
Mm-hmm.
The billionaire in town, that's a good option.
Exactly,
and they bring up the, the motive of like his parents dying. Like,
yeah.
I like that they, because sometimes you watch any type of media and they don't do the obvious, and it's like, well, how realistic is that when you don't do the obvious? And here they're doing the obvious, so I like that.
Although Gordon again here is like almost kind of condescending to Essen of because she's the one that again like brings up that like, hey, maybe it's Bruce Wayne, like you said, like he's got the money, he's got the possible motive of like his parents were murdered in this town because of criminals, like maybe that's why he's dressing up as Batman and taking out these criminals. But like Gordon kind of like laughs and kind of like brushes it off in an almost kind of condescending way of like, oh Essen, when will you learn, like to see beyond stuff like that or whatever. But
right.
But that conversation doesn't go on long, because at this point Gordon sees a truck that's just kind of barreling down the street. He says that like we kind of catch a glimpse of the driver. He's like, whether it's drugs or he had a heart attack or like he just kind of like lost control, he's barreling down the street at night, and he's heading right towards this old lady that's walking across the street.
Yeah, and they start chasing after the truck, and Batman's also on looking and sees it, and then Batman does his Batman thing, and in the last second, while Jim's trying to like get this woman, Batman swoops in and gets her out of the way of the truck, and you see like the cart she was pushing gets exploded.
Yeah.
And, he saves her, but the most important thing here is that Gordon saw it, and that one thing, for the first time in the story, puts into his mind like, whoa, is he a bad guy? Like, he just saved an old lady. So,
exactly. Yeah. Like the police force is spending so much time trying to figure out who he is or stopping him without actually kind of looking at what he's been doing.
right.
Although again, to Jim Gordon's credit in this scene, like he pulls off some very much like action hero stuff on this, because like we have this like out of control like like huge truck that's barreling down the streets, and and his response to it is to drive up alongside of it, have Essen like grab the wheel at the last second, and he just jumps out of the driver door to like hang onto the passenger side door of this car as it's like again just like going down the street at like 60-80 miles an hour, just gunning it, and like that's that's his means of trying to stop it. And unfortunately, like the time in which he did it and like how close he was, like it's kind of shown that like it wouldn't have worked. It's like like, oh, he failed, like he wasn't going to make it. Fortunately Batman was there to stop it, but like a very noble thing of him to like try and take it into his own hands in like a completely action hero movie type of way for that. So
absolutely, yeah, very exciting couple panels, like honestly.
But I believe they crashed the car, so like Essen was kind of like knocked out for a little bit or unconscious and bleeding, and like Jim was banged up from all this too. And by the time the other police get there, I think they had they had Batman kind of cornered too, and they suspected him of kind of causing all this and hurting the cops. And so what they do is they kind of start cornering him and chasing him in the alleyway, shooting at him, and he finds his way into this presumably abandoned building, at which point the kind of like the last few panels and pages of this is the commissioner kind of calling in more police officers, like, hey, we finally caught the Batman, he's in this building, he's got nowhere to go, and his response to that is to basically firebomb the building.
Yeah, so also while Batman's running away, he gets shot in the leg.
Yeah.
But he gets a bullet in the leg, and Gordon, I think, tries getting on the horn. Yeah, he tries getting on the radio to tell them like, no, he saved that old lady.
Yeah.
before he could get through, like you said, well, the Brandon SWAT team comes in.
Exactly.
So they come in and Commissioner Loeb, he bombs the building because it's supposed to be abandoned.
Yeah, because at that point, again, even though Gordon is trying to like tell them what basically what happened, get some sense of them, and basically tell them to back off a bit. Like at that point, the commissioner supersedes with his orders, and he's like, no, we've got the Batman here. Let's they say the commissioner wants the corpse, so just do whatever they can to kind of bring him back dead.
Yeah, and so that I believe that's where chapter 2 ends, right?
Yeah, chapter 3 basically picks up right after that. Even though there's been a lot of time jumping in most of these, chapter 2 picks up as the burning building is collapsing.
Right.
The SWAT team has kind of come in at like the ground and like second floors. Batman was basically trying to get to the roof of the building to kind of get out of there, but when the bombs went off, he was kind of trapped, and the building is collapsing. He even sees, at some point there's this old man at the building, because when he first runs into the building, we kind of see that there's it was funny too, because talking about the kind of dated language, Frank Miller uses the term wino a lot.
Yes.
As a term for just an old drunk, right? Like an old lush. But to have him use wino for all these, but they mentioned that there's these old winos in this building, so it wasn't completely abandoned. Some homeless people were, just kind of using it as shelter when this got attacked. And we see one of them, that's basically, as this building is collapsing on fire too. And, Batman sees him too, but, he basically says that he can't save him, and this is one of the first points where we see that Batman, I guess, sees his limits and knows, that not everybody can be saved, that even though he's doing everything he can, he can't help everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Actually, I didn't even take that away from that, but you're right. I mean, I knew that he saw the dude and didn't do it. He couldn't do anything, not that he didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he definitely wanted to, but at this point, the building is falling down. He's basically in a free fall down the stairwell. His belt catches on fire. He mentions he has in his utility belt, he's got a thermite, which catches fire, and is almost like a bomb ready to go off. So he has to take his belt off and chuck it to the side. So
I actually was going to bring that up. I like that Frank Miller chose to do that, because then he doesn't have this technological advantage over the cops for the portion of the story. He has to rely on his skill and a few limited gadgets that he has with him.
Exactly. Yeah. When he lands on basically the ground floor of this burning building, he kind of does a personal inventory. He's all right, well, I've still got my blow dart gun in my boots. I've still got some weapons in my cape. And when he gets to this big metal latched door at the bottom, he's fortunately I have still have my lock picks and my gloves too. So he uses that as an opportunity to basically open up this almost bomb shelter that's set up at the bottom of this apartment complex, and hides out in there.
Right. So he's hiding out in there, and then that's when Brandon's SWAT team starts storming the place, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were at this point, kind of already going through, they're looking through the rubble, trying to find him. They've got the first 2 or 3 floors kind of already set up, but they don't know where he went. And Brendan and his his immediate group of people are at the bottom, and they find this metal latched trap door to the basement, and they assume, hey, that's probably a smart place that he would have gone into. So they muscle it open and go down there, but they don't find the Batman down there. At that point they get down there and it's empty, but they hear over the radios Batman's voice. At that point he had basically been again ramboing a bunch of these other SWAT members, he sneaks up behind 2 of them, knocks them out, the usual stuff of but he mentions too that there's probably 20 of them left, and he's only got a small bit of munitions left, so he's just trying to think his way out of this.
Yeah, so right before he had right before he goes into the metal door, like you said, he looks around and he sees a chimney, and you just see it, and then he goes in this metal door, and then the cops come and they see the chimney and they don't look in it, and then they go down the metal, and then while they're down there, like you were saying, Batman pops out of the chimney, of course, he's in there, and he like knocks out the 2 cops, and then you find out that the metal door led to, like you said, like a little bunker area where somebody was. And then you see a fireplace, and the cops are looking, and they're like, "Oh crap, he went up the chimney," and that's when he starts radioing them, and then he drops a gas pellet down the chimney, which I thought was like classic Batman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
they scramble for their gas masks, and like he's like trying to smoke them out, to like knock them out, and then like he even like topples on top of the metal door itself, like like some knocked down like beam from like the building's frame, like to like try and like keep them on there, so like they're basically presumed safe, like he's not like leaving them there to die, but it's more the thing of like, all right, like for him to get out of there, he's got to kind of like contain as many of these SWAT members as he can.
Right. And I like that like 4 or 5 of the cops couldn't lift that log of wood off of it. Yeah. He's the one who knocked it down by himself. And I'm like, again, Batman, this big, like larger than life hero that can do anything that a man can't do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very subtle ways of like just like seeing these guys like struggle with it. Even though we knew like Batman, one man did it. But well, he's got them trapped down there. He goes over. He's got one more bit of technology. He's got this electronic device in his boot.
Yeah. So I know I mentioned this earlier that I had seen Batman Begins before this, and it borrows this scene directly from it.
Exactly.
And I remember reading this for the first time and knowing what was going to happen, and I hated that I knew what was going to happen because it's so awesome. I wish I got to read it.
Exactly.
And, for the first time. So he does something super awesome. You want to tell?
Sure. Yeah. Like at this point again, he's got the police officers trapped. Some time has passed. They set up like marksmen outside the building. So like, Batman knows that he's kind of cornered. Even though he's kind of dealing with it as much as he can, like there's no actual good way out. Except for again, he mentions that this bit of Wayne electronic technology that's unpatented that he's been working on is able to resonate a frequency that only bats can hear. Even miles away. So he presses, like this button on the bottom of his boot, and a signal kind of goes off all the way to his bat cave, the bat cave that like Wayne Manor was built over, and is filled with bats. He presses this button and he says, within minutes, they'll come, calling to the signal. So he is in this burnt out building, surrounded by cops, buying his time as a literal cloud of bats is flying towards this location.
Yeah, and I love that, like, during this time, like, a group of observers had formed to, like, see what was going on, and including Selina Kyle.
Yeah, Selina Kyle and Holly, who was, like, the kind of, like, the teenage, like, child, like, young girl that was there, too.
Yeah, so they're all watching, and I just like that Mazzucchelli and Miller took the time, like, in the panels when the bats come, like the crowd gets all messed up with, and, like, the bats ruthless and they're just attacking everybody.
Exactly.
And, like they're not just going for the bad guys, like they're bats. They're just gonna attack.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, that's what he wants. Is he, it creates this this chaos and confusion, which gives him enough time to kind of one of the cops mentions that they saw like a bike kind of like kind of come out of nowhere, and Batman's able to hop on this bike and kind of get away. And evade like the helicopter marksman that was there, and like the cops are like chasing in their own cars.
That drove off the pier. I didn't remember that panel. That was so
yeah. There was one officer, I forget the name that they mentioned, but like they said that he was so loyal to Commissioner like Loeb's his orders that he even ended up like following that trail of bats, even though the bats like flew over like whatever lake or river was nearby. Like he just drives off the pier chasing them.
And that was a funny little whatever panel. I liked it. So Batman escapes then, and that's end scene with that, right?
Yeah, we get some kind of like epilogue stuff at that chapter. Like you had mentioned, like even the crowd was getting bitten to the point where like like the hospitals had like ordered that like everybody in the crowd would be like vaccinated and stuff like that. So like we see them like administering like the vaccinations in them, saying like nobody's gonna be able to like sit down for a few days just because they're sore from all of it. And then
And is this when the Essen stuff starts? That's what I'm trying to remember. Like that, it gets a little.
yeah, that's right at the end, because they're
Okay.
kind of like discussing you know, that whole event and what they thought happened.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. So there.
And we do also get one more piece there too, where after all the confusion happens, apparently a local tailor calls the cops saying that there was a suit that was missing, but on the counter there was like more than enough money to pay for it.
Yeah.
So that kind of like we see Jim Gordon there at that tailor shop, kind of like, you know, getting the news of what happened and, you know, using it as a kind of more of a clue to kind of flush out who they think that was, you know, this Batman person. And then yes, we get once more we get Gordon and Essen. He mentions that they have like these nightly like coffee runs where they, you know, they go to like a local like diner or coffee shop and, you know, kind of like sit and talk shop. And they're, you know, they're talking about they're talking about uh, Essen still believes that Bruce Wayne is the Batman,
Yep.
but there's mention of, you know, he's been presumably off skiing. You know, he couldn't have been there. You know, like he was. You know, he's got these records of, you know, who he was with and all that stuff. Although she even mentions that it's the perfect alibi of, you know, like these injuries that he sustained skiing perfectly. You know, these huge casts perfectly kind of cover like the areas in which Batman was like shot or, you know, like injured during that whole hubbub. So
again, back to what I said a couple times about like what would really be happening if this happened. And I love that like she points that out, that it's not
yeah,
overlooked, like obvious fact that if they didn't mention, you'd be like, well, how could they not know that? So
exactly. Yeah.
I like
Also,
that.
real quick, shout out Mighty Thor in the chat. Didn't see you mentioned there, but yeah, what's up, man? Our
Mighty
homework
Thor.
is done. I hope we'll be checking your work after this, so be sure to leave it on our desk. And yeah, if you have any insights or questions or comments, right now we're going through we're basically hopping on to the fourth chapter here, the fourth and final chapter. But yeah, like as we're talking about here, the final scenes of 3 have Gordon and Essen in this coffee shop, you know, having their kind of like nightly talk.
Yeah, and then is that where they go from there to get the cab?
Yep. Yeah, it's a rainy night. You know, like you know, Gordon was gonna, you know,
Move
call for
for a single guy, not a guy with a kid on the way, Jim.
at this point. I think the child was born. You know, like a baby at this point, like a few months old or something like that. So you know, Barb Gordon is kind of, you know, back at the not the hotel, back at the apartment. You know, like with this kid. You know, Gordon's out for this late night coffee with a coworker, female coworker who we mentioned during their talks. Like he mentions that he finds out that she was also from Chicago and he was there at the same time as part of the police force. But he mentions you know, it was a small town, or, you know, like a small world, because, you know, they're both there and, you know, probably went to like the same they like the same, was like a diner or like a shop or something that they would go to. Johnny, you there?
Did I disappear?
Yeah, your video looks like cut out.
Hold on. Hold on. Am I back?
I think so.
Okay. Sorry.
Some degree. We'll get it set up here. All right, there we go. Awesome.
I'm back. Okay.
Yep. But yeah, that Gordon and he finds out her first name is Sarah. Sarah, you know, they were in Chicago at the same time because they knew this one like you know, food spot. You know, he wonders to himself, you know, like how he could have missed that, you know, probably bumped into each other at some point when they were there, but unwittingly. But he's like, though, come to think of it, you know, she was probably in high school, you know, like when he was, you know, there as part of the police force, you know, visiting, you know, having food. So
just like Dr. Manhattan going for the younger just
robbing the cradles. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of parallels to, you know, some of the stuff that happens there. But yeah, the scene ends, you know, like it's a rainy night. They're, you know, trying to call for a cab to get, you know, go to their respective homes. And, you know, like it starts the downpour again, and, you know, they're caught under this the awning of, you know, some apartment building, and they share a kiss. This married man and you know, single coworker.
So okay, we just got to talk about this now. I just like okay, rereading this, I'm like, did Frank Miller just have to do his Frank Miller thing with this? Like, why was this necessary? I don't get it. And I even tried to like ask myself, like, is it imperative to the plot? Does it move the story along? And like, spoilers, in a little bit, you know, they try to blackmail him for the affair. So I'm like, is that the whole reason he wrote this in? Because it really ruins the whole persona of Gordon that he up until this point has built up. That he's this good cop. And I just didn't like that he took this turn for no reason, and it's never mentioned, at least in my knowledge, in continuity after this. Like, why do it?
Yeah, to be fair, for me, it was a thing of, I took it as a way in which to show kind of, you know, he can't be a perfect, you know, man. Like, obviously, like, there's got to be some flaws to him to some degree. And they use it as a means for that, I'd say. But also, like, he does kind of have some redemption too. You know, like, not cutting ahead too much, but, you know, like, it does create this tension with him and his wife, and, you know, what's going to happen and all that. But he does, you know, like, have a low point at that point, you know, like, because, you know, he even like realizes himself, you know, like, it was a stupid thing to some degree, you know, like, he's you know, he's married, he has a kid on the way, you know, but he had a moment of weakness, which I think he then kind of uses as a way to, you know, kind of bounce back and rise up from it.
Okay. I mean, I could see that. I don't know. I just don't agree with it in the storytelling. Like, I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know. It ruined Jim for me. I can't.
I don't know if it was necessarily ruined. Like I said, I feel like it was a way in which to give him like some kind of character flaws, which he then later uses to kind of come back from. So then, you know, chapter 4 starts, you know, and you know, more time has passed since that night, but they're still having they're trying to have, you know, another like late night coffee session. Which, quick, I don't know if you know much art history, but are you familiar with the painting Nighthawks? The one that takes place at like that night deli. Like, it's like almost like from a street view looking in through the window of like this couple that's sitting in the dining.
Yeah, were they doing that in that?
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong here, but they definitely seem like a like the shots from the streets that they do are very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, it looked like an homage. I agree.
Yeah, so it made me think of that. But he's there with Sarah again, this time talking about you know, hey, this can't kind of go on. You know, like, she's at this point transferring, you know, because she felt like it was the right thing to do. You know, just kind of like, you know, like, just kind of move on. You know, like, kind of get out of the city. You know, she goes to New York at this point, at the police force, to kind of move away. And yeah, you know, like, he's kind of beating himself up, obviously, over this thing that he did.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, because he just feels bad for Barbara, and I think there's his moral compass coming back into play.
And what is it, Jimmy? He has a name for the baby at this point. Like, they know that it's a boy, James or Jimmy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's James Jr.
Exactly. Jimmy. Yeah. Little Jimmy Gordon. And then from there we get introduced to a character with a great last name. It's Jefferson Skeevers.
Oh yeah, this dude. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he is like a we hear about him over a news report talking about like this local like drug dealer and pimp. I couldn't tell if he was like supposed to be the guy from Flashes back in like chapter 2, like that embellished story that he's talking about. Like, I don't know if it was necessarily him or not, but yeah, like, it's similar kind of style. Like, hey, here's this kind of like higher level criminal that's, you know, like peddling drugs,
the cop and everything, and
exactly, yeah.
No, I went back and because I read that too, and I think it is the same villain from the second chapter.
Yeah. One of the things that I liked, it's so in his apartment, like, when he's talking with I think it's his like his attorney, because at this point, like, he's been pinched for like you know, like, whatever it is, like drug running and you know, whatever criminal activity that he's done, and like, he's talking with his lawyer about like, you know, like, how they're going to get out of this and stuff like that, you know, like, basically almost like who to bribe. One of the small things in the background, I don't know if you caught this, he has a statue of Frank Frazetta's Conan the Barbarian. Like, it's an entirely minor thing, but I'm a huge fan of Frank Frazetta. So like
Okay.
when I was paging through it, like reading the dialogue, like out of the corner of my eye, like like that detail in the background caught me. So like I looked at it instead, and I'm like, that is Conan the Barbarian.
Wow. Okay.
And not just Conan the Barbarian. It is straight up Frank Frazetta's painting titled Conan the Barbarian. It's like that same exact stance. Like it's
Right.
Conan with like the bangs and like the very long hair and like like the woman draped over his like leg and stuff like that. Like he's just
Yeah.
kind of got that in the back of his like um lavish penthouse. And I don't know. For me, that made me feel that this Skeevers guy is okay. I don't care what the tabloids are saying about him, what the news reports say.
You do.
Don't let his last name fool you. Skeevers is all right.
Wow. Okay, so Mike and Skeevers are in cahoots with each other. I will not forget.
Justice for Skeevers, because yeah, like
you better wear that on a T-shirt to work. I would love to see.
I'll get that printed up by next time.
I would dig that.
But yeah, his whole character arc is an interesting one because it again goes to show like how corrupt and broken the entire criminal justice system is in Gotham, because here's this criminal who they mentioned has had like 4 previous arrests,
Yeah.
and is like back in the system again, and like not really worried because he kind of knows that he's gonna beat this. Like he's got enough money, he's got enough like clout to kind of pull enough strings to get out of it again. So
yeah, and he mentions that like they have Flask in their pocket, and this is where he starts to mention like, well, if I go down, I bring down Flask.
Exactly. Yeah.
Flask, then he brings down Loeb, and the
exactly. Yeah. This is where kind of Gordon gets more of his moment to shine, because I believe it's what is it, Batman pays him a visit to kind of
oh wait, we missed something first. Right before this, when he was let off before he talked with the lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah, he's let off, and Gordon is talking to Dent, and because it mentions like Dent doesn't put up a fight. And Gordon's like, what the hell, dude? Like, how could you not put up a fight? And Dent's like, just wait a second.
Exactly.
Because
because I forgot. Yeah, like when Skeever's lawyer left the apartment building, Batman sneaks into the window and kind of roughs him up a bit to get him to play ball in this.
I thought that was one of the best scenes in the book when he's like. He's like, I know pain, and I will introduce it to someone like you. And then it just goes black, and you're like, what the hell?
We get some great, classic like Batman monologuing to villains.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, he scares him straight, to say the least.
Yeah, and like the next scenes are him, at Gordon's desk, like saying like, hey, like I'd like to turn myself in, like I'd like to change my testimony here.
Again, and Gordon says, don't even go tell Loeb. He's like, do not tell Loeb.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just going straight through with it. So at this point, like he goes above the commissioner, and the commissioner catches wind of this. Like it's like, hey, we've got this huge case on this guy. Like, why didn't you stop to talk to me about it? Like, like I wish you'd play ball more. And at this point, we Sarah.
Yep. See, it came back to bite you in the butt there, Tim, didn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, he wasn't thinking. A moment of weakness, causes like this strife with him. And like he starts getting blackmailed about it.
Yeah. So you can tell right there he kind of has a decision to make. Like, do I tell Barbara, and that way we can prosecute him, or do I not tell her and then she finds out anyway? So
exactly. Yeah, like find out
that
about,
starts
like,
going through his head at that point.
Yeah, like find out about like through the newspapers or something, no less. And next we see Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon together in a scene here. Jim Gordon swings on by Bruce Wayne's manor, to try and possibly tie up some loose ends about the suspicions that have been going around. And Bruce Wayne is there with like just another model that he mentions, like he doesn't even speak like the same languages as her or something like that. Like they don't even know anything like that.
I would ask her name, but she doesn't speak any language.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's such an awesome line.
Yeah, she's like draped over him as they're like talking on the couch.
Yeah. He's like drinking booze, and it's like 9 a.m. or
exactly. Yeah. But
giving off the persona that he just parties, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jim brings Barbara Gordon there too, to like when they're discussing And you know, he's kind of, you know, questioning Bruce Wayne, you know, asking, you know, kind of where he was on these dates, to which, you know, he has Alfred pull out this date and logbook that he has, you know, like, here's who he was with, you know, during all these times, you know, just mention that it's, you know, like name after name of, you know, like just celebrity, you know, like celebrity actress, you know, like playgirls and stuff like that, like all these like models that he's spending with, like kind of building up this you know, the persona of, you know, like he's, you know, some millionaire like Lothario, just, you know, like he is seen with Gordon right here, you know, just some lady whose name he doesn't even know.
Yeah, and again, like grounding it in reality, I like that Bruce Wayne has the wherewithal to have this persona to avoid suspicion, and
Yeah.
he covers every base that you could think of. He's got
Yeah.
an alibi. He's got people that'll vouch for him, people that have seen him in places. Like, he covers everything.
Yeah, much like the skiing incident. Yeah, like, you know, like even using it as a way to, you know, like cover up the fact that, you know, like he, you know, in his real exploits as Batman, you know, like he broke his arms, he got shot in these places, but, you know, like if he ever needs to be seen out in the public, oh, you know, like it was a skiing accident, you know, that's why I have this cast over my arm and legs. So, you know, he's always thinking about, you know, one step ahead of how can he use, you know, like the, you know, the Bruce Wayne persona basically as a way to, you know, cover up what he's doing.
Yeah, and he does a good job, because Barbara certainly, she even says he's a pig. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Barbara buys right into you know, the surface level. You know, like, oh, here he is, you know, like you know, drinking champagne at, yeah, you know, like you said, you know, like before like noon, you know, with you know, some girl, you know, floozy just kind of like draped over his arms. So, like, you know, she buys into it, but you know, Jim is kind of seeing a little bit deeper through it.
yeah, and then something is said about secrets.
Mhm.
and they leave, and it's in this moment that Jim decides he's going to tell Barbara about Essen.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they're driving away from the Wayne Manor, and yeah, like I think it's talking about, you know, like I think Jim might mention that, you know, like, oh, you know, like, you know, all men have their secrets, something like that, and, you know, like that kind of leads him into the conversation of, you know, he just kind of stops, and like we see him, you know, turn to her and see, like, I've, you know, Barbara, I've got something to tell you. And it
Right.
cuts back into the manor where like Bruce is just, you know, just like staring at the window. He's like, oh, they've been in the car, like parked out there for like 10 minutes, you know, it's like presumably, you know, like having their talk in the middle of like basically like the driveway there. And eventually, you know, they drive off. But yeah, that's where, you know, Jim Gordon tries to redeem himself by, you know, coming clean with the whole affair.
Yeah, and then I don't know if it's the very next scene or it's shortly after, you see like people are calling the house to blackmail him, and she answers the
Yeah.
phone. And
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like, you know,
I thought that was so sad. Actually, I've always
yeah.
thought that was a sad panel. Like,
Yeah, like it's whether it's, you know, like it's I forget if it's actually mentioned who it was, but, you know, like whether it was like some like tabloid reporter or something like that, you know, like or you know, maybe even, you know, just somebody at the police force, you know, just trying to
right.
like, you know, because they might think like, oh, hey, I found out, you know, that this affair happened. I want to be the one that, you know, can twist that knife, you know, and then like, you know, basically be the first one to tell him and, you know, get him in trouble. But, you know, like at that point, you know, like she already knows, and it's
Yeah.
she looks very you know, sad in that scene, and then like Jim Gordon is just like in like the kitchen, just like standing there like sullen, just kind of like overhearing it. You know, like it's again like all this takes place in like one panel, but like the way in which it's drawn and framed, it's like it's so evocative of, yeah, like that just kind of, you know, he may have ripped the band-aid off and like gotten ahead of like this whole scandal and like the pain that it could have cost, but like still just like the cost that it had on, you know, on
Yeah.
his relationship.
Yeah, pretty devastating. So
And then after that we have we get more news cases or news reports about a similarly masked person, because during all this, Selena, in kind of like the background, has been using the money that they saved, because she took Holly, that young, like, you know, child prostitute that was they had like shared the same pimp or whatever. You know, like
right.
they, you know, they were basically like, you know, like, we're getting out of this business. They, you know, like beat them up. They got out of there. They took their money and ran. And Selena, after seeing Batman in action for the first time, she decides to use the money to buy a similarly created like cat outfit.
Yeah, and so she gets the Catwoman suit, and Holly's like, "But you spend all your money on this," and she's like, "Well, we're gonna make money with this." And
yeah,
essentially, the news reports you're hearing are that there's a burglar going around stealing valuables from the rich and wealthy in Gotham, and she She ends up stealing a collection of dolls that's worth $40,000, but she has nowhere to sell it. Plus, even if she tried selling it, she's only going to get half, and because the middleman and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
The business side.
I like that one too, because that's like almost like a joke setup that they're working on, because we find out that it was Commissioner Loeb's toys, but we see like on his desk he's got like these Charlie Brown figures, and like he has like in different panels like he's got that stuff kind of strewn about, and then he's the one that gets it stolen, and when she's like playing with it, like she like is beheading like this Charlie Brown doll to kind of like show like that it was like these loved items that he had, and like she's just like what am I gonna do with these, like I've got no ways to fence these. So
yeah.
But yeah, we kind of see her start of the Catwoman character of this cat burglar that's going around stealing to make ends meet.
Yeah, and then she decides that she wants to make her own name for herself, and so she's going to, instead of being referred to as Batman's assistant, she's going to start scratching people's faces and leave her calling card, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because she's getting mistaken as either the assistant, or they think that the crimes themselves were just straight Batman. So she's like, all right, well, I need a way to differentiate myself.
So she decides she's going to rob the Roman.
Exactly. Yeah.
Carmine
Falcone. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
We cut to atop of like this like lavish penthouse, like top of a rooftop, like almost like a pantheon, that he has like mocked up in the middle of Gotham City. This bathhouse that he's talking to, I believe it's his grandson.
It's his nephew.
Johnny. Who we know is just as Johnny, and then he's a member of the family. And he's basically being kind of like groomed or talked up into possibly committing this hit, like kind of getting into like the life of crime, in which they're having this talk up there, and Catwoman is actively making her way up there, taking out guards, and Batman is also overseeing this, because he's spying on the conversation. He's, I think, basically just trying to get like a smoking gun here, like having Carmine admit like on tape, like that he's basically setting up a hit.
Yeah, that seems to be what's going on, and then Catwoman essentially ruins it because she
exactly gets too greedy
off, and so she's attacking the guards, she's scratching their faces, and then she kind of gets surrounded, and Batman has to save her from the rooftop. He batarangs all these bad guys,
exactly.
And they fall over. And there's a panel where it shows her smiling. I think she was kind of like turned on by it. And
I mean, like it's the thing of just kind of like seeing like him in action, or obviously like if you know enough of Batman lore, like the common thing of Batman and Catwoman, like having a romantic interest, so like it's maybe kind of an allusion to like the start of that relationship. So
that's what I thought. That's what I took away from that.
But as far as what he came up there to do, like the plan was ruined, but at least they were able to beat up a few bad guys. So
yeah, exactly. So that's where it leaves that, because then he leaves and he doesn't have all the information he needs.
Which would have been useful, because it later turns out that that Johnny character was being hired to put out a hit on Jim Gordon's baby.
Right. Because what they say in there, it's kind of messed up, but it's like the way to hurt him now that he's a father is by his kid. Like that's
exactly. Like in much in the way at the start of this, they were trying to beat him up, just physically,
send a message
but now now that more time has passed, his wife is now in the city, and at this point, like they've successfully had the baby, they're using that as a way to get him.
Right. So from there,
so we see I believe it was so we kind of find out that like more of the ties between the mob and the police force is Gordon was like home at like 3 a.m. or something like that, or like it's very early in the morning. He mentions he's had barely any sleep, but he gets a call direct from Commissioner Loeb saying, hey, there's like this kind of like petty crime or something like that, that he's being called out to go in on and talk and look at himself. But he's like I've been asleep for like 3 hours, like surely there's like 20 other, people on the force that could do this. And he's like, no, I specifically want you. He's like, all right, like he kind of, reluctantly gets out of his house, starts driving over there, but he sees this motorcycle rider like dart into the apartment building, like a parking complex that he was just pulling out of, and like it all starts dawning on him, like he starts putting two and two together. So he takes that as reason to like turn around, kind of go back in there and like try and figure out what's going on. And when by the time he gets there, Johnny is there with in the back of a car with like a gun or a knife pointed right at Jim's new son.
Right. I think that I think it's implied that he thought the motorcyclist was going to attack Barbara.
Yeah.
And then he goes in and it's a car and it's Johnny, like you said.
Yeah.
So then like a pretty cool Jim Gordon moment, they're threatening Barbara.
Yeah.
And he's like, if they get away, she's dead. And he just shoots one of the dudes like on point.
Exactly. Yeah. He's just like, it's gotten to the point right now where, like the only way out is, to take action. So he does. Yeah. So, he shoots at one of them. Barbara's, fortunately safe and like ducks down, but the car is able to drive off with, with the hitman and the baby in the back.
Yeah. And as soon as that happens, the motorcyclist pops out again, presumably to chase the car, but Jim Gordon knocks the rider off and hops on the bike and takes off. And then Barbara then points the gun at the motorcyclist, like holding him hostage.
Exactly. Like, hey, don't go anywhere. But, right. He's keeled over and like, mentions, he just says like, without showing his face, like he says, like Barbara Gordon, like, I'm not gonna let anything happen to your baby. And she's, just stunned at this and kind of lets him go. And he runs off,
and grabs a bicycle, which I didn't remember that either. And I was like, wait,
exactly.
Really? Like he catches up to a motorcycle chasing after a car on a bike, even for Batman. Come on.
It's a spoiler alert, Johnny. That's Batman on that bike. Of course he's going to catch up to a motorcycle.
You're right, I guess. Good point.
But yeah, so it starts to come to this climactic chase scene where it's at the front of the chase, it's a sedan with the hitman and the baby in the back, followed by Gordon on a bike or a motorcycle, and then Batman on an actual bicycle. And it culminates on this bridge where I forget why, but the car kind of like loses control and smashes.
Jim blows out the tire.
Oh yeah, he drives up on it and shoots out the tire, causing it to lose control. They're having this standoff on the bridge. He's trying to wrestle the baby out of his hands. They get knocked into like the barrier of the bridge, and at this point, the baby gets knocked out of the hands too hard and falls over.
Yeah, and then so there's like scary panel of Jim reaching over saying no, and in the next panel you see Bruce, who was the motorcyclist, of course, diving off of the bridge because he got there unsuspectedly, and he surpasses Jim on the fall, and they land in the water, and naturally.
I mean, you mentioned like that that was like a really actually kind of like heartbreaking scene because like we see like the silhouettes, of them like struggling on the bridge and like this small silhouette kind of going over further. And then like just a close up of his face, just screaming no.
And it's like an all red panel.
Yeah. Like the panel goes red. It's the first time we see like huge lettering on it too. Like otherwise it's been very kind of subdued, just like, text boxes. But yeah, it's the first time where, we see like the change of lettering like that too. Like it's, very powerful at, just we basically even hearing the scream at that point, like with how much emphasis they put on it.
I agree. Yeah, I think that was personified very well.
Yeah, and like you said, we see a second silhouette going down after it, and catching the baby, and it was a clever way that they worked around this of during the fall into like the river. Jim fortunately survived. This unknown motorcyclist caught the baby, and the baby's okay. But at some point, Jim's glasses got knocked off in the fall, and even though they're 4 feet away or whatever, he's like I can't even see you. Like I can't thank you or know who you are or anything like that. To kind of
see, I wanted to ask you about that though. What do you think? Did he not see him, or is that his way? Is that like wink, wink? Like what? I know who you are. I was right this whole time. but I'm gonna say my glasses fell off because you just saved my baby.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that too after I read it. I was like,
I think
you
it's
know,
that. That's what I took from it.
yeah, no, like I certainly want to put it past him because like obviously up to this point, like we know that Jim isn't a stupid guy. Like he's tactical. He's thinking, like he's trying to be like ahead of everybody, and like maybe he knows that there's value in this kind of partnership, or like whatever could come out of it without actually like letting him know like the secret. Like that he knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne. But even if it wasn't, at the very least, it's a very clever way to like kind of have him retain his secret identity.
I agree.
But yeah, and at this point, it's basically almost like the wrapping up, the culmination of the story. It was a failed hit. They're not going to silence Jim Gordon. He's able to go forward with this case of not only putting Skeevers behind bar, but the fact that like he was going to be giving up Flass, who is in turn going to be basically like trying to like give up Loeb, and trying to basically in one case like rearrange the entire Gotham Police Department and try and reduce like all the corruption that's been plaguing the city.
Yeah, and I like that they're giving this like montage synopsis. The like Loeb hasn't gone to jail yet, but he's going to resign from his commissioner office.
Yeah, he steps down. I forget the name of the person they're putting up in place, but Gordon mentions like he's kind of even worse than Loeb, so like it's can't win everything, but
right. And then Gordon gets a promotion. It says
he was overlooked for the being moved to commissioner, but he's a captain at this point, so he's still moving up in the police force at this point. He mentions he became captain. Sarah moved on into New York. He hears like she's doing fine over there in that police force, and his wife has kind of in some ways reluctantly agreed to marriage counseling. So they're trying to move past what happens and build a life together.
Yeah, and then it last few panels it ends with him saying that the people of Gotham are worried because there's this new threat.
Yeah, exactly.
of a crazy guy who wants to poison the water supply. Named Joker.
Goes by the name Joker, yeah. But fortunately, he has a friend that could help him with that. And then we see, like the bat signal go off in the distance, and a great way to end. So yeah, Batman Year One. How are you feeling about it now? After, because you said you've read it before, obviously, right?
Yeah, actually, this might be one of the most read books in my whole collection. I've read this a few times. Yeah, so I've read this. I've seen the animated adaptation. Excuse me. Batman Begins takes heavily from it.
Yeah. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Last week when we suggested, because I had mentioned that to my knowledge I didn't know that there was any movies of it, but then you mentioned that there was the animated version of it. But as far as in like live action movies, Batman Begins definitely pulls a lot from this in terms of setting up the Bruce Wayne origin story, or the Batman Bruce Wayne to Batman origin story.
I mean, I think it's a home run. I think it's 10 out of 10. I think Frank Miller nails it. This is when he was still writing gold. Personally, I still like Dark Knight Returns better than this. I think that they're always going to be compared because they're both by Frank Miller. And they're like the alpha and the omega of Batman, the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, it's not like I like Dark Knight better, but it's not like there's anything wrong with this. It's just it's great. It's great. It's really good. I like how serious it was. I like the tone of Batman, all that stuff.
Like much like we mentioned too in like the deluxe version, like where Frank Miller in an interview mentions that like Batman isn't about like smiling and laughing. Like I kind of agree to that. Like obviously it kind of in some ways may kind of create this world that's like almost too oppressively grimdark, like where it's like it's always like we constantly picture Gotham as like it's always nighttime, always like raining, always smog, or like the police zeppelins up in the air. Like it seems like this very kind of oppressive and depressing world where it's the kind of thing of like why do people even like live in Gotham anymore? Like it kind of creates this world that's unrealistic with its kind of trying to be like hyper realistic or hyper like gritty. But I feel like Year One is able to kind of balance that. you know, like it makes, you know, flawed characters between, you know, like Bruce Wayne at the start, where he's, you know, kind of inexperienced and overly eager, and you know, he's kind of making mistakes. And then, you know, Gordon too, you know, like even though like he's, you know, a lot older and wiser and, you know, like has the experience, you know, he still has, you know, his personal flaws and personal demons of, you know, like a subtle one that they kind of talk about is like his smoking habits.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You know, Commissioner Loeb mentions, you know, like that it's kind of like a dirty habit or something like that. Like, you know, like he's hoping that he's not gonna be smoking in his office, stuff like that. You know, there's times where like we see just Gordon kind of um, you know, just like chain smoking, or, you know, like just like out on a roof, you know, just like smoking, you know, to kind of like calm his nerves. And then obviously, you know, like he has an affair, you know, like he's a flawed character, but it still makes him feel a lot more real.
I agree. And yeah, Frank Miller definitely nailed the voices for everybody. He wrote everybody really well. I like that he interweaved a lot of Batman lore with Harvey Dent, Catwoman, Alfred, Falcone, Joker, like all these little Superman, all these mentions.
Yeah.
So,
John mentioned in the chat too that yeah, like it is a great you know, starting point. Obviously, as the name year one implies, so like this is, you know, the first year of Batman. You know, like it spans from January to December.
yeah.
And yeah, it's, if you're looking for a place to start, or, you know, kind of like dig into the Batman lore, it's probably the most accessible because, you know, like you said, the original Detective Comics issue, you know, like it is very much of a time, you know, like obviously it's important because, you know, we wouldn't be here without that, but it is, you know, like it's the kind of thing, if you know, like you look back at it, it's kind of campy, yeah, kind of silly, but, you know, like if you want a version of the Batman that feels like how he is in the movies, year one is definitely the best way to do that, because, you know, like you see, you know, his kind of his rise to who he is. You know, like it wasn't an easy journey. You know, he, and in a lot of ways he couldn't do it alone. You know, like it's about uh, his friendship and alliances with not only Jim but also the Harvey Dent. You know, we don't really, you know, he's not seen that many times in the story, but, you know, like it's shown that like there's one point where Gordon is like in Harvey Dent's office asking him questions, and like right when he leaves, you know, like you know, we see like Batman, you know, like hiding out in the office too, you know, like showing that there is like this kind of dynamic of them working together to, you know, take down these criminals. So it's an interesting way, yeah, again, to, you know, see the rise of all of these different characters that are, you know, the key points in the Batman lore.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it's the most accessible way for anybody to get into Batman. I mean, that's why they wrote it. That's literally why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. You know, like high marks for me. It's been it had been a while since I read it. But yeah, you know, it's still worth going back to and rereading, even though, like, you know, Batman Begins and, like, you know, modern Batman media definitely draws heavily from this as a way to, you know, how do we have a man that's dressed up as a bat seem like, you know, he's still something that's, you know, realistic and you know, somebody that we can sympathize with and follow. So
yeah, I'm glad we read it. Definitely a good reread.
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So what are you thinking for next week?
What other late 1980s DC titles can we find that are, you know, about like gritty crime and stuff? Because that seems to be the the streak that we're on here.
Well, you know what I ordered last week? It's not here yet, but because John Temple backed it up. Sin City.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if that was written in the 80s or the 90s, but I mean, when I get that in, we should definitely dive into that. Gritty 1980s.
I mean, it doesn't. Don't get me wrong. I do love that, and it doesn't. You know,
Yeah.
I'd be fine with doing that again. But I was trying to think of like what a, not like a complete opposite of, but, you know, like one dipping into Marvel.
I like that idea. Marvel.
I don't know if it's maybe a little too big. Like, I don't know if we're shooting wide here again, but Infinity Gauntlets might be something, or if nothing else, one that I would definitely suggest that I feel like is kind of usually overlooked is the first part of that, which is the Infinity Quest, which
Thanos
is,
Quest.
or sorry, yeah, Thanos Quest, yeah, where it's the lead up to the Infinity War. You know, it's where Thanos is kind of going around the galaxy, you know, gathering up the stones.
So if we're gonna do that, I